Good morning, everybody. It's Cooke here, leading business advisor and founder of The Engine. And today I'm going to be discussing whether you put your work priorities ahead of your marriage and relationship. Joining me today, I've got renowned speaker, sports psychologist, mindfulness and resilience expert John Shackleton, who's joined me before previously, and Helen McDermott, senior lawyer from Righteous Law, specialising in litigation and a strong focus on family law. Both of them are advocates for helping people find their voice. Helen especially, she's an advocate for men who sometimes are disadvantaged by the justice system who doesn't favour them. Yes, thanks, John. As a business advisor, I often find that with 80% of businesses I work with, many of the problems overflow from their personal life into their business. So realising that you're happy at work, you're more often or not likely to stay at work rather than go home, and that causes problems. So obviously the telltale sign is one that you're not confronting. And when the telltale sign is not addressed, it presents really, really big problems. So we need to address it and come up with a solution. So John, I'm going to start with you first. Quite often we're talking, you and I, about these issues that are happening and overflowing from the personal life into the business. How do you obviously get that person to understand that this is actually happening to them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think from my own personal perspective, that's all I can speak for, is when I suddenly realized how much my business was affecting my personal life. Up until that point, I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see there was any problem. And for me, it was like a flash, a bolt of lightning almost, to suddenly realize, oh, goodness me, the amount I'm doing here and the stress I'm under is actually transferring into my marriage. So it was like an instant, oh my God, I've got to do something about this.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like that for everybody, but I think we become so focused on one part of our life that we can't see somebody else's perspective. I think that's a really difficult thing to do, even without stress. But once you're stressed, you only see the world through your own perspective. The more stressed you are, the less easy it is to walk a mile in the other man's moccasins, because all your attention is facing this way rather than that way.
Absolutely, and like I always say to people, you know, if you want a different outcome, you need a different perspective. So actually getting external help is going to be able to give you a different filter and a different lens to look through. And
I think the key with it for me was to basically try and take away the stress, even if it's only for half an hour. When you take away the stress, you can see the world from somebody else's eyes. Well, when you're personally stressed, it's very difficult to see that.
Absolutely. Helen, I'm going to come over to you now. You and I, we met a couple of years ago through networking, and what I love about you, Helen, is that you really champion those that are really vulnerable. And being a lawyer, I'm sure both sides of the scale will say that both their clients are vulnerable, but you've worked on some really difficult cases, probably cases that people wouldn't even want to pick up. So let's just start with, who is Helen McDermott?
I'm a solicitor who is down to earth, very what you see is what you get. I like to straight talk. I listen to my clients. I might try and give them some ideas that may seem a little bit outside the box. I may not recommend going straight to court. There may be other ways to do things. So I guess what I say is I really like to listen to my clients and try and get the full story, because sometimes what they think they want and what they actually want are quite different things. And there might be a slightly outside the box, I guess, way to get to what they want that they haven't thought of. So I like to discuss alternative options with my clients.
And you're from down in the King Country area, aren't you? Like you life not as a lawyer, but you went the long route, I should say. So do you want to tell the viewers about your other career background, so to speak?
I had a bit of a long way to get to the law, I guess. I grew up in Tokoroa, which is a forestry town in Waikato, and left school when I was 16. Basically on my 16th birthday, I left school and I left home the same day. So I left school with nothing, and I left school with school C, that's all. And so I moved to Rotorua, lived there for a couple of years, then moved up to Auckland. And when I got up to Auckland, I was working retail and I hated it. And then I ended up working outside in a logistics cool store place, and I was the only female out in the yard, and I was working out in the yard in the weather, and I thought, oh, I'm not doing this when I'm 40. So I thought, this ain't really me. And then I thought, my dad always said to me, get a money degree and it'll always do you well. And what Dad meant by a money degree was an accounting degree. So I enrolled in AUT and I did my certificate in business, and that's like a 2-year diploma. And then I cross-credited that over to an accounting degree and finished my Bachelor of Business, majoring in accounting. And I was working as an assistant accountant at the AA, actually, in Auckland at the head office. And then I thought, this ain't really me either. And I don't really want to be an accountant. And I kind of realised that about 4 or 5 papers or 6 papers out from the end of my accounting degree. And I thought, well, I can either quit now and have 3/4 of a degree, or I can finish it and have a degree. So I finished it, and then I paid off my student loan. And as soon as my student loan was paid off, I enrolled in law school in Waikato, moved to Hamilton, did my law degree in 3 years, and because I got 1 year cross credit, and then I was off. And I wanted to be admitted by the time I was 35, and I was admitted on my 35th birthday.
Oh, well done.
So I did it the long way, but I got there in the end.
And I absolutely champion that too, Helen, because not only did you do that, you were also a mother of a teenage boy, and that also presents a lot of juggles in itself. And being a lawyer in terms of what you do, family law, it's not typically sometimes an 8:30 to 5 job. You've got to deal with people outside of hours and the emotional stress that goes with it. So thank you for telling us about, your journey to get to where you've got. And hopefully that'll give the viewers, some insights that, hey, it is actually okay to go and do a career change and do what you do, follow the path of your dreams and do what you want to do that's going to give you that fulfillment. John, I'm going to come back to you and get us on talking about today's topic. How does one compartmentalise business and personal?
Okay, I was thinking about that because you wrote the question down before, and I was thinking about it. I was thinking one of the most important things is the thing we've already covered, which is motivation. If you understand that there is a problem of transfer of stress between personal and business, as soon as you understand that, you are presumably motivated to fix it. And I think very often we try to work out how to do something. The reason we're not doing it is because we're not motivated. I'll give you a great example. Weight loss is a fantastic, we're all trying to lose weight, right? We all know technically how to do it. You eat less and you exercise more. We can complicate it as much as we like, but that's it. The reason we don't is that because we're not fully motivated. Now, if I came and lived with you and held a shotgun to your head the whole time, and I said, if you put the wrong stuff in your mouth, I'm going to pull the trigger, you would be motivated. You would know what to do. You already know what to do, but you would be motivated, so you'd lose weight. The unfortunate thing is that would cost you a lot of money because I'm expensive to have you stood next to me with a shotgun. So very often we confuse this idea of how do we do it. I think there's a very simple how, and that involves these blooming things. These things encroach on our life so much, and to compartmentalize business from personal, I think we've got to learn to switch these off when we're not doing business.
It's about discipline, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. And discipline is to do with motivation. The stronger our motivation is, the more disciplined we can become. And that's really the key to all of it.
Yeah, I guess just coming back to what you're talking about motivation, if things aren't happy for us at home, then we obviously gravitate to what we know to be happy for us, but it doesn't actually solve the problem. And that's the issue.
Running away, yeah.
Yeah, what's it, sorry?
We're running away.
Absolutely, we're not confronting the issue in the way it needs to be confronted, and that's to have those courageous conversations. And I guess that's actually also putting a backlog, especially for you, Helen. In lockdown, those confrontational issues become more heightened, simply because we don't have a workplace to go to. We are actually now working at home and in the same space where those issues are actually happening. So I guess really, John, coming back to the courageous conversation part, it has to be dealt with. The problem doesn't go away. What would you suggest that somebody does?
To have a conversation, well, the first job is to have a conversation with yourself, isn't it?
That's right, and I'm glad that you said that. We always talk about that, but people go, why am I talking to myself? I'm not the problem. But in actual fact, it does start with you.
It has to. I mean, if you and I were married, Catherine...
God help you, John.
God help you as well, I tell you. If you and I were married, there's only one of those two people that I can control, and that's me. I can't control you. No. And therefore I can blame you for everything I like. But the truth of the matter is, the only thing I can do about it is change me.
Yes.
I can't change you. That's your job. But I can change me, and therefore that's the only thing I really need to concern myself with. And I do realize it's very easy to say, well, it's their fault. Yeah, but so what? That doesn't fix anything, deciding it's their fault. The only thing we can do is change us.
Well, it comes back to what I was saying before, different perspective equals different outcome. If you know that what you're doing currently is not working, then you do need to try something different. Sorry, John.
It's painful. It's painful to admit it. Without any doubt, it's painful to admit it. But my mum used to say, when I was young, she used to say, a problem is always 6 from one, half a dozen from the other. She's saying it's never one-sided. There is always two parts to a problem, and the only bit that you can fix is your bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And my mother says that still at 88 years of age, even at the window the other day when I saw her through the rest time, she's still saying it. Helen, if I can cross over to you, I mean, obviously, by not dealing with ourselves and dealing with the issue at hand, these issues overspill and they end up becoming litigation issues. And obviously, you want to help people and you want to avoid them all the costs in the world. But you've got a client who's at your door and they're going, Helen, this is what I want, this is what I want you to do, and I'm right. And sometimes you've got to have a discussion with them to filter through what is wrong, because that's where you're going to get caught up on the other side of the fence if they're not dealing with the whole issue in a whole to you. So how do you manage that? Someone's coming to you, they've got this issue, and try to avoid the big litigation costs.
I guess the issue is a lot of the time they do come in and they just think that they are correct. And I need to say, well, we actually need to get the full story, and I need to get all the information, and I need all the documents, all the background, and I can't give you any advice until I get that background. It would be negligent of me to give you advice with only half the story. So, yeah, I basically say, look, unless you give me the full story, I can't help you.
And what I say to people is, before you go to a lawyer, make sure you've got all your paperwork in order. Because when you go through the paperwork, it actually gives you an opportunity to actually revisit and look at where the gaps are and maybe just get a different perspective, but at least you're going prepared.
You don't
That
actually, Helen, you don't always get the full story, do you? What you get is somebody's view of the story. You don't get the other side view. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that can come back to bite you in the butt, so to speak. Sometimes if you do end up in court and you file the documents without the full story or what you believe is the full story, because you've only been told bits and pieces, and then it comes in court, next minute you're blindsided when the other side pull out something that's really, really critical and relevant. And that's not a good look for a lawyer, and it's embarrassing and it's difficult. So I try and make sure I get the full story from the start, whether it's good or bad. I tell the client, you've got to tell me whether it's good or bad, because if you don't tell me, it will come out and it will look worse if it comes out in court, if we don't know about it. If I know about it in advance, then at least I can try and mitigate some of the risk or issues with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So John, the reason I got you on here today was, Helen has a lot of clients dealing with tremendous stress and worry. And, in any kind of litigation or any kind of situation that puts us into confronting those issues, it can be very, very challenging. And you always talk, John, about don't listen to up here of things that haven't happened yet. So what advice would you be giving to Helen's clients who are really thick in the trenches of worry? Because it also happens with business owners, right? You worry about something that hasn't happened. And like even today, I've started my day with 3 phone calls about things that haven't even happened yet. And it's like...
I know. Well, here's the pathway. So we get this idea of I'm thinking about the future. Then the next step is I'm worrying about the future. The next step is outlandish anxiety, and the next step on that path is depression. So hopefully that's provided people with motivation to do something about it, because I went down that route and I went to the final position, and the final position is one further than depression, and you definitely don't want to go there. That's suicidal stuff. So I don't want to go down that route. People don't want to go down that route. What we've got to do is come back and say to ourselves, actually, do we know anything at all about the future? And I listen, Catherine, I know you're a really clever businesswoman, but you don't know anything about the future, do you? All you know about is now. And
I've contacted Marty McFly many times from back to the future and didn't get a response. So no, I don't.
Wouldn't life be wonderful if we could predict the future? But we can guess, and that's all our mind is doing, is guessing. There's no reality in it at all, which is really difficult for people to accept and agree with. I was talking to somebody the other day who said, if I don't do this, then my business is going to fall apart. And I kept saying to him, how do you know that to be true? I understand that you think that is correct. I appreciate that. But you don't know that to be true. If you knew it, we could predict the future, and we can't. So what we've got to do is, it's discipline again. We've got to learn to stay present. And that it sounds all fluffy and, oh, that's a nice idea. But the truth of the matter is, worry is in the future. Depression, well, you just don't want to go into the future. The past you can do nothing about. It's what the past is, the past. It's solid. It's what it was. Absolutely. The only way forward is being present.
Absolutely. And I like how you talk about being present, because that's something that, obviously, Helen, when you've got people coming to see you, they're vented up with all this emotional trauma that's going on, because it is emotional trauma. I've been in those trenches as well, and for anybody that's watching us that says they've been in the trenches of law, on the side of the camp, they've obviously had a really good life so far. It's coming. It will happen. And I guess, Helen, you're sitting on the side of the table and you've got someone who's puffed up chest, anger, or someone who's really, really emotional. How do you deal with that, even yourself personally? Because, that's a huge toll that you're taking on. Using John's description of being present, I mean, that's something that you obviously, need to kind of work on yourself. But you've got these people coming at you with all this emotion, and you're a lawyer, you're not a trained psychologist, let alone a doctor. So how do you deal with that, Helen?
You do end up feeling a bit like a counsellor sometimes. And I guess I spend a lot of my time telling clients, look, don't worry about the what ifs. If something happens in the future, well, then we will handle it when it pops up. There's a waste of time worrying about what may happen, because there's 100 things that may happen. We can't plan for every contingency that may or may not happen. And often the ones the clients are worried about are worst case scenarios. So I try and tell them, look, I do give them some sort of ideas of what I think may happen, but it's not only the bad stuff that may happen, it's the good stuff. And then I try and tell them how I think we can try and work with the other side or with whoever we're working with to get to a solution that works for both parties, so they can come out with a resolution that suits both of them.
I think the challenge you've got is that we've got to try and avoid the emotion, haven't we?
Yeah, definitely.
We've got to get away from the emotion, and the emotion is triggered by this thing up here. Thoughts and emotions basically destroy all of our logical and sensible thinking.
Yeah, and I've had a couple of clients say to me before, they send me like drafts of what they want to put in their affidavits, and it's all full of emotive language that it does them no favours. So I basically take all the emotion out and just put it in there, basically just what has happened and just straight out, just facts. And I've had a couple of clients email me and go, thank you so much, you got my point across, but without the emotion. And right. I believe if you file affidavits or documents that are full of emotive language and you just come across like a ranting lunatic, basically, and it does you no favours. You want to come across in court as a logical one, the realistic one, the one that is sane. You don't want to come across as that person that's full of emotion and just goes off on tangents. So that's what I try and say to my client. We need to put you across in your best light, and your best light is you as a sane, rational person.
So Helen, are you able to, in your own life, not forget the business, are you able to treat most situations without emotion, or do you find the emotion gets strong for you personally? I don't mean in business, I mean outside of that.
Yeah, it is hard sometimes. And I must say, I do obviously a lot of family law, and there are times I do go home and I cry. Yeah. It's like, what can you do? It's in a big family law case with young children, it's no one wins in the end, really. No one really wins. No. And it's just, it's heartbreaking sometimes.
And that, I think that's our problem as we become adults. We become slaves to these emotions. These emotions take us over and we react instantly. If we're able to, technically it's called disassociate, put the emotion here and observe it, and it has no impact on us, then we make sensible, logical decisions. But that's a real skill. It's something, it's called mindfulness, and you have to learn that skill to be able to not make the stupid decisions that most of us make most of the time.
Yeah, look, if I could just touch on that. I mean, Helen, you talked about the fact that you're not a counsellor, and I have to also sort of have that same affinity with you. Like, I hear things from many of my clients that they wouldn't even tell their best friend because they're absolutely embarrassed by it. And a lot of it is actually centred around their personal lives. And I'm absolutely... on one hand, I feel humbled to be trusted with that information. But on the other hand, I know that I'm not the right person for them with that information. And so I've said to my client, look, you can continue to keep talking to me about things like this, and it's good that you've got someone trusted to do that with. But the reality is you still need to deal with it. And so what I tend to do is I refer my client to John. John and I have conversations quite regularly, and John says, Catherine, happy to help these people, but they need to want to help themselves first.
Absolutely. And that's the motivation thing, unless they're ready. You can't fix many of these problems by yourself. You have to talk it out with somebody, but you've got to be the one running towards the situation. You can't be going, oh no, this is not my fault, it's somebody else's fault. It's just, nothing will work that way.
Yeah.
You're dead right.
And
Get a professional to help you.
Yeah, and look, I had a client recently that I sent to John, and this client sent me a message and said that, you know, after a session with John, they realised that they couldn't continue on the path that they were on. And my whole reason for sending this person to John is that I want my client to stay alive. The insurmountable stress that my client was under was absolutely life-threatening. And cardiac problems were happening, and a whole bunch of other things, you know, gut issues, cardiac issues. It has a real bearing on us. And so
also the effect of those things on that person's family as well.
oh, absolutely. And how
Net
they
effect would have been massive.
yeah, and how they interact with people and relationships that they lose, and they go, how did I lose that relationship? You know, not actually understanding that they actually had a role to play in that. So Helen, if I could just come back to you, I mean, obviously, what really resonates with me always when I talk to you, Helen, is how much you do champion for the blokes out there. You know, you've told me some horrific. Well, when I say told me, you don't give us names or anything like that. You're really confidential, but you're part of my networking group, and part of the networking group is that we're actually sharing stories from the trenches of what we're working on, and some horrific stories that you're working with. And most of them are fable, you know, they're just not even true, you know, and you've got to cut through that, and it's really unfair. And how do you, like, you know, can you give the viewers an idea of just high level some of the stories, some of the caseloads in the trenches that you're working on? Just a couple of sentences on each, you know, just people can know the type of lawyer you are and what you're doing.
I do a variety of stuff. Some of my more memorable ones, I guess, is I had a guy come in one day and said, I think my wife's trying to take my 2 young children back to Taiwan. And it's like, well, why do you think that? And he gave us the details, and it was obviously clear she was. And we managed to get an order to stop her taking his kids away. And it's like, that's really important stuff. It's like the relief on his face when he knew that his children were not going to be taken away from him. That's one. And then I guess I don't only do family law. Another, I've also done another similar one where one director took some money without consent from his business or from the business, and without the other managing director's consent, and he was going to flee the country, and we managed to get an injunction urgently because we knew he was flying out to China the next day. We managed to get him an injunction overnight and served him, and he couldn't go to China because we'd frozen all his bank accounts, but we got the money back. So, you know, I guess a lot of the time there's some of those situations where we have to act really, really fast because something's imminent is going to happen there and then the next day. But not every case is like that.
Yeah, and Helen, look, you do talk quite often about the inequitable unfairness in the justice system between women and men. And, you know, I've seen it firsthand myself as a business advisor. How do you, like, I mean, it doesn't mean that you don't work with women, like I know that you have women clients, but you do gravitate towards the vulnerable, the unfairness of helping people. So what's driven you to that point of helping more vulnerable people?
I guess there is a bit of a unconscious bias, I guess, towards women, and it's like, people might think, especially if the children are young, that the children are best with the mum. It's like, well, no, they're actually best with both parents. And a father's a parent as much as a mother. And there's no reason a father cannot be a full-time solo parent. And even, I remember once in a bit of a side issue, but one case I was in, and the lawyer for child and the lawyer for the mother were both saying that my client shouldn't get day-to-day care of the children, even though the mother was violent to the children. He shouldn't get the custody of the children or day-to-day care because he worked long hours. And I thought, here we go. We've got a woman judge, woman lawyer for the mother, woman lawyer for the child, and then there's me and my client who works hard. And so the judge actually said, well, there's lots of solo parents out there, lots of solo parents who work long hours. It makes no difference whether or not that solo parent is a male or a woman, a father or a mum. It doesn't matter. And that's not an issue. And I thought, yay.
Nice, good judge, smart.
Yeah. I really thought that was good.
Oh, look, that's a really nice story. And look, it is actually important that the children do get to have that time with both their parents, because, you know, at the end of the day, that child didn't come into the world to get caught up into a fight either. They came in to basically, you know, grow up with two loving parents, and sometimes that can be in a separated situation. Or in fact, it should be, not sometimes, it should be in a separated situation if it's a toxic relationship, but there's no reason why it can't continue. John, I come back to the real reason why we're here today, and obviously, you know, personal relationships overflowing into the business. A lot of the times I talk to my clients about, well, you know, finding the commonality, finding that love again with people, you know, and because, you know, it's not that we fell out of love, we just got busy with life, and therefore we got different interests. And if we're really, coming back to your word about being motivated, if we're really motivated to resolve something, then we'll be committed to finding that commonality.
Absolutely.
So what would be some key takeaways that you would offer to the viewers who are watching this? Because there are plenty out there who are still in denial that they've got a problem, but they know they do.
For me, in terms of understanding that better, the big turning point for me was when I realized, and this was after I'd gone through a divorce with my first wife, was that the word love is actually a verb, and therefore it's a doing word. You have to, it's about giving. Living, it's not about receiving, it's about you doing. So this idea of, I think we fall in lust, and then we learn to love the person because we learn to give to that person. That's certainly my experience in the world. And the more you give, the more easy it is to love the individual that you're with. So we sit, and I think a lot of us sit and wait for something to come to us in terms of keeping a relationship fresh and happy. But actually, the best thing you can possibly do is give to that relationship without the idea of waiting for something to come back to us. So we're just literally giving. And personally in my life, the more I've given to relationships, the better those relationships get. Not just with my spouse, but with my kids and my family and friends. The more you give, the better that relationship gets. So I think for most people, it's an understanding this idea that love is a verb. It's about giving.
I'm going to say I agree and disagree with you on that because like you, I got learnings from you know my divorce as well that I had, and but you know I've just had my first wedding anniversary with Peter Cooke, and we had instant love. So we're one of the people that did get that. It came to us and hit us like a lightning bolt. So and
that's fantastic.
And that's very rare. We get a lot of people saying to us, we want what you and Peter had. And that's really sweet. But the reality is also is that Peter and I are also committed to talking to each other about things when we need to. So,
and that's part of the giving process, that this talk,
it is, yes,
coming forward and
right.
giving. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I said I agree and disagree, yes, there's a lot of people out there that do need to really look at that giving and you know, but at the end of the day, if you do decide that you're so far apart that you can't actually bring it back together, you go and seek a lawyer. Make sure you go in and remember the 30 years that you had with that person or the 20 years that you had with that person, and do you really want to pick a fight? Because more often than not, that person is the mother or the father of your children.
Yep.
And then you're going to go on this whole nasty journey. The reality is, even when that journey's finished, they're still the mother or the father of your children for life. And so
there's nothing you can change there.
No, absolutely not. So look, just wrapping this up somewhat, just some tips from you, John. You know, obviously my main tip, and I'm going to give a tip actually before you, John. My main tip is in all your trusted advisors, actually just know that they're there with a profession. So with Helen, it's law. With me, it's business advice. Happy to listen to you, happy to be that person that is the good ear. But you do need to work with the trained people like John, like other psychologists, to actually be able to confront that it is you that needs to change and do that, you know, mindset reset. And that's a habit. So John, speaking of habit and tips, what would be the top tip that you would give to the viewers today, just on the subject of, you know, personal and business relationships and how they impact with each other? What would you say to the business owner today who may be going through some personal issues?
Well, I think it ties in with what you said about dealing with a professional. I think one of the biggest learnings that I can give people is to try and, I think we should all do this as much as we can. Try and take your own ego out of the picture. Put your ego in the fridge, put it on ice, and don't try and be right or be righteous or be correct or be in charge. That's your ego just showing. If you can step back from that and allow other people their position and allow yourself to be wrong, not at fault, but just wrong, because we're all wrong all of the time. My wife tells me that all the time. But if you can take your ego out of the problem, life's a hell of a lot easier. I'm not saying all your troubles go away, they don't, but most of them are caused by ego. It's
an evolution, isn't it? Like, I mean, you know, this is something that we have to work on in life as an evolution. And when we put ourselves first, then we actually find that we get that more clearer perspective and that different outcome that we were talking about. So, Helen, in terms of you and the viewers, they're going through a turbulent time in their personal lives, and how do they avoid that litigation? What would be the best bit of advice? I mean, this is me saying, don't go to a lawyer and give them money. avoid this whole emotional and financial turmoil. It does happen, but what would you say to people?
I'd say go to a lawyer that listens to you, and go to your lawyer prepared. As we've discussed previously, you need to have all your information that they will need. You don't really want, it's annoying when a client and doesn't have the documents and you have to go and give them another 2 weeks later and then they still don't have all the information. So get all your information that you'll need and come in prepared, and then tell the lawyer what you're wanting to achieve, and then if the lawyer listens to you, then they'll give you some options of how to proceed, which may or may not include going to court. Just because the ultimate thing the client wants is a resolution, and court is not always the way to that resolution. Okay. But a lawyer can help you with resolutions that are not through court, whether that be a settlement agreement or a parenting agreement or a whatever sort of agreement we can do outside of court.
Great advice, John and Helen. And if you are watching this and you are a business owner and you know that you are going through some trying times on the personal front and it is impacting on your business, do reach out to us here at The Engine. We've been in your shoes, we're still in your shoes, but we also have an amazing community that's here to help you. And it's better to actually share that problem and halve it than to be dealing with it by yourself. So thank you both, Helen and John, for giving up your time today to
Thank
come
you.
along and meet with other business owners that are out there and offer some really sound advice. You guys have a great day now. Take care. Yeah.